Josh Hoover is the Luka Doncic of TCU football.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. I've been covering TCU athletics for the past 12 seasons. We're brought to you today by FanDuel. FanDuel is where the game starts. If you want a live bet on NBA games, you can do that at FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app. Later on in the show, we'll get into Vashawn Allett hitting basically a buzzer beater for TCU to get the victory over Oklahoma State tonight. Hit a three with 0.8 seconds left to give the Frogs the win. We'll also get into some of your thoughts, baseball season coming up. But we start today with a fun conversation around football. I was on with my friend Paul Catalina on 365 Sports this afternoon. He has a show called The Triple Option. And it was the first time I'd seen Paul in a couple of weeks because of some scheduling things. I typically go on there once a week. But he gave me the opportunity as a Mavericks fan to rant and air my grievances about the Luka Doncic trade that the Mavericks made, sending him to LA in exchange for Anthony Davis. And really that was about it. So it had me thinking, who is the Luka Doncic on TCU football? Now, there are no trades in college football, but who are the guys that we would consider untouchable? Because Luka, up until it happened, is one of those players in the NBA that conventional wisdom would tell you, if somebody made the call, picked up the phone and said, hey, could we get this guy? What could we do to make a deal happen? The Mavericks should just hang up and say no. He's young. He's super talented. He's a top 3 player in the league. We're not moving him. Who are those players or that player for TCU football? A better way to frame it, or a different way to think about it. Which player would you be most devastated by or concerned about the team's future if they hit the portal in the spring transfer window? Sometimes the simplest answer is the best answer. I'm going with the quarterback, and I'm going with Josh Hoover. Is that an easy answer? Yes. But I also think it's the correct one. Josh last season was fantastic. And honestly, the offense revolved so much around him because of their struggles in the run game, because of the issues with the offensive line. Josh had to be great. And when he wasn't great, they lost. And when he was, he gave them a chance to pull off some wins in the second half of the season. He was really good. Behind him right now, I'm super excited about Adam Schobel. I think he's going to be a good QB. I would not be excited about him having to start as a true freshman. I like Ken Seals. I like how TCU has constructed their quarterback room with a veteran presence and a guy like Ken Seals, and then you got a young player like Adam Schobel. I would also not be excited about Ken Seals having to start a bunch of games this year. If that happens, I think that is bad news for TCU football. Now, this defense should be set up to be really competitive and really good this upcoming season. And honestly, on paper, you could make the argument that maybe that coming into the year is the stronger unit. But even with that factor and that aspect of the way they're building their team happening right now, I still think Josh is the dude you can't afford to lose. Now, if you look past him, the other players that I considered and I thought about, the Deal brothers, and I'll kind of hedge and use them as kind of a package deal here, but no pun intended, even though it kind of was. Devin Deal and Marcus Deal. Devin Deal, especially once Cooper McDonald went down with an injury and was out for a few weeks, he really emerged as a pass rushing specialist. And he was a godsend this year. Like, Andy Avalos comes on campus bringing with him a new defensive scheme. TCU did not have stand-up edge rushers on the roster. Now, Jonathan Back sort of fit that bill, and they had to fight to keep him, but that was about it. Marcel Brooks was an interesting name, but even for an edge rusher, Marcel was a little slight. Devin Deal comes over from Tulane and just balls out, plays really well. He'll be back next season. And Marcus Deal in the middle at defensive tackle was fantastic. When he went out with an injury, along with Hakeem Ajibalaiba in that Baylor game, you noticed it, right? Like it was there. They could not stop the run. They couldn't slow things down up the middle. If you lost those guys, that would be felt around the team. Honestly, I'd love to get your reactions here. In the YouTube comments, you can tweet at me at SimcockSteven. Who in your mind is the player that just absolutely can't, under any circumstance, hit the portal? That if it happened tomorrow, you would be very concerned about TCU's prospects for next season. I think there's a lot of other good players around the roster. Eric McAllister comes to mind. Losing him would be really rough. But also receivers a spot where I just think you have more depth. And I don't know if it would totally translate, but I think there's a better opportunity that you could make up his potential production somewhat for next season. Not that you could fully replace it, but that you could cut into it a little bit and make it a less noticeable gap. Where if you lose Josh Hoover, that changes the whole complexion of your offense. Because with Schobel or with Seals, you couldn't do some of the things that you were doing last season with Josh under center. Running back, kind of a hodgepodge right now. Not sure who's going to emerge. Corner, I think you got some quality depth there. Linebacker's an intriguing spot. I mean, Caleb Alarm-Zor would be a big alarm bell if he left. But that's another place where Caleb showed some good things last year. You're not really totally sure what you're going to get from him once he gets the lion's share of the snaps. So it's sort of hard to project what it would look like with him not on the roster, even though he was part of the rotation this past season. So in my mind, it's got to be Josh. But I want to hear your feedback. Who is the untouchable guy on this roster right now that you just can't afford to lose? There's a lot riding on what Josh can do this season. As much as I would love for the running game to emerge and to be better and be more improved, for the defense to continue to take steps forward, I think even if those things fall into place, the way this TCU team is built, you're still putting a lot on his arm. And he's going to have to deliver, and he's going to have to play really well for TCU to be a factor in the Big 12 championship race and potentially in the playoff. One intriguing thing about this discussion, too, you could argue last offseason, if we were having this talk about this time, the guy at the top of the list would be Dominic Williams. Because Josh Hoover up to that point wasn't a proven starter. And while you didn't want to lose him, you didn't know what you were going to get from him either. D-line wise, Dominic was a big-time force for a couple of years. And losing him felt really devastating. Now, I think it was in some ways. They would have been a better team with him on the field last season. There's no doubt about it. And maybe he would have helped them, especially early in the year, as some transitions were happening, just stabilize some things by being a force and being an anchor in the interior defensive line making plays. But he ends up leaving for Oklahoma. And, I mean, TCU survived. I think they would have had a better season with him on the roster, but they didn't just completely crash out and fall off a cliff. The defense, as the year went on, got better and improved. O-line wise, you can't really afford to lose anybody either. But again, I just think you have more depth, and which is funny to say because I've talked a lot about the offensive line depth and the need for more. Losing Colton Deere would be a big loss. And if what I've heard is true about the types of offers these O-linemen are getting in the portal, I think he's been tempted to go. but thankfully he stayed loyal to TCU so far. Ultimately, though, Josh Hoover is the guy that you just can't lose. And so TCU, they've done a nice job over the past few seasons, making him a priority, retaining him. I expect that to be the same story this upcoming season. And who knows? I mean, if he puts up big numbers again, maybe he is a potential NFL guy, or he sticks around for 2 more years and hopefully does some really special things in a TCU uniform while he's here. When we come back, TCU basketball, a win at the buzzer on Wednesday night. We'll talk about it next year on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. I mentioned them at the top of the show, FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel app today. NBA action is just getting started. There's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. You can live bet throughout the games, so you don't miss the So even if you miss the opening tip or want to bet on the fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. If you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets in the same game parlay. Right now, new FanDuel customers get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's right. Your first $5 bet hits, you get $150 in bonus bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app. Vashawn Alette led the Frogs in scoring with 16 points. He hits a 3 off a really good inbounds pass from Jace Posey. It was deflected, but Jace threw it, 3/4 of the court down the floor and gave Vashawn a chance to throw a 3 up there. He nailed it. They win 73-72 off that big shot, basically at the buzzer. Frogs are now 6-7 in conference play. Oklahoma State falls to 4-9. It shouldn't have been that close. Okay, let's just get into it. TCU sort of melted down late in that ball game. They led really start to finish and did a nice job. Every time Oklahoma State would cut it to 5, cut it to 1, tied it up at one point around the under 4-minute timeout, TCU would battle back and get that lead again. And they had a 3-point lead with a little over a minute left. Oklahoma State kept getting some buckets. Eventually, Oklahoma State had some free throws where they could have tied it up, and they missed those free throws, but they got the rebound. Eventually, scrambled for the ball. TCU has a chance to inbound it up by 1 with 22 seconds left. And if they hit some free throws, at least not seal it, but at least force Oklahoma State to hit a 3 to win or to tie the game. Well, Jace Posey makes an errant throw on the inbounds pass. It goes out of bounds. And 5 seconds later, Oklahoma State scores, and suddenly they have a 1-point lead with 15 seconds left. Frogs can't score on their ensuing possession. Oklahoma State splits a couple free throws. And then with 3 seconds left, Posey gets the ball to Vashawn Alette in the front court. He hits the 3. They take the lead. They hold on. They win. I said last week, Alette reminds me a lot of another one of my favorite players, Damian Baugh. Damian Baugh, by the way, made his debut in a Hornets uniform tonight. He was signed to a 2-way contract, got to play, and scored 16 points. He was really good. Hit a corner 3 for his first NBA bucket. Has done some nice things in the G League. But Alette reminds me a lot of Damian. He's super confident. He's not as consistent of a defender as Damian was yet. But if he's focused and he's locked in, he does a nice job defensively. And he's just one of those dudes that's not afraid to shoot the ball. On this team specifically, you need a guy like that because they don't have a lot of scorers. They don't have a lot of players that can create their own shot. So Alette filled that void. 16 points tonight, as I said, led TCU in scoring. 7 of 18 from the field, 1 of 4 from the 3, but the one that he hit was the big one. It was the game winner. Another positive sign from this evening. Micah Robinson gave this squad really good minutes. 13 points in 20 minutes, 4 of 7 from the field. Jace Posey has turned things around in a big way in the last 6 or 7 games. First time I really noticed him was like, oh, wow, he gave them some good minutes in that game against Baylor on the road. had a huge offensive rebound late, put back that extended their lead. Today, he's looking more confident on the offensive end. Had a nice play this evening where he caught the ball in the wing, gave a little ball fake, got a reverse layup. Only 4 points, but impacted the game in a lot of different ways. Played good defense, had the big inbounds pass at the buzzer. Malik Diallo, referees were crazy in this ballgame. They were just calling everything. I know at one point there were 40 free throws in the game. I think they ended up with 44 total. A lot of fouls, both teams in the double bonus in both halves. But Ernest Uday fouled out with about 4 minutes left. David Punch played sparingly because he was constantly in foul trouble. Had 4 fouls about midway through the second half. Had 3 fouls in the first half. Just a rough night for him, being able to stay on the floor and give them good minutes. Malik was great. I mean, he ended up scoring 10 points, hit all of his shots, was 2 or 3 from the free throw line. He was fantastic tonight. Really good job by him. These are all young players that they were excited about before the season, and it's taken some time. It hasn't been immediate. All of them have had their struggles, but slowly, Posey showed some good things. Malik has showed some good things. Micah Robinson, honestly, I think he's been pretty solid all year long. I've been confused at times as why he hasn't gotten more run and hasn't gotten more consistent minutes. But they continue to grow up. They continue to do some good things on the floor. And I would just say this. This is not a good basketball team, if I'm just being real about it, okay? I think best case scenario, they find a way to finish 500 in Big 12 play. I do believe the NIT would be valuable for them just because it gives them more experience. And I know there's a temptation when they win a game like this where they really tried to give it away, and Oklahoma State, thankfully, just sort of pushed it right back to them, to focus on that aspect of it and just be frustrated and say, man, why can't they just run out there and beat a team by 15 points, a team that's 4-9 in conference play? Why can't they just blow the doors off of them and get a comfortable victory? Well, because they're young and because they're inconsistent and they're a 500 basketball team, right? Have some fun. Like, this was a fun win. It was cool to see Vashon Alette hit a big shot in a big moment like that. They have surprisingly, for a team that struggled, they've been really good in these moments, especially at home in conference play. Noah Reynolds had the game winner against Kansas State. He had a big bucket against BYU late in that ball game. That was the difference. Alette hits the 3 tonight. That wins the game. So enjoy these moments, because the hope is that this season is a good springboard for the future. They've got some young talent here. They've got a core group of individuals who can grow together and can play together and can continue to improve and get better. But it's going to take some time. And is there still an outside chance that they get hot and go on some sort of run? Sure there is, but I'm not banking on it. And I know most of you aren't either. You've watched this group. We kind of know what their ceiling is. They play Arizona State on the road on Saturday, turn around and get Texas Tech next week on a Tuesday night at home. I doubt they'll be favored in either of those games. And they shouldn't have been in a situation tonight where it came down to the wire. But when it was time to make a play, they made it happen. And Vashon Alette especially, I don't know what it's going to look like in a couple of years when he sort of emerges as the dude. But he can score. He has confidence. And he's shown an ability to get his own shot and to hit some big shots. He did some nice things against West Virginia down the stretch in that game. Those games were very similar. Frogs had like a 10-point lead in the second half. Suddenly it's down to 2. Now, West Virginia never took the lead if I'm recalling that correctly. But, they were right there throughout the game. And when TCU had to, they made plays. So it was a fun victory tonight. I don't think it really changed the outlook for this group, big picture or long term. They got it done when they had to, though, and I enjoyed watching it happen, even though, again, they shouldn't have been in that spot. But they executed the play when they had to, and they get a victory to get to 5-6 in conference play. When we come back, we'll get some of your reactions from yesterday's show. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team. We do it here every day. On Wednesday's show, I discussed Avery Helm, corner, coming back from an injury. Steven Johnson from the 4-Star Telegram said that Avery mentioned he's spending a lot of time this offseason learning that nickel position, which means he'd be doing a lot of coverage in the slot. He'd be coming up in run support at times, having some versatility. So I don't think that's where they'll have him primarily. Sounds like that's just something that they want him to brush up on and have that knowledge in his mind. This is a big year for Avery Helm. This is his chance to solidify himself as an NFL prospect. He was really good a couple of years ago when he was healthy and available. And it's almost like you're adding a transfer in there because it's somebody who wasn't able to give you anything last year because of the ACL injury. Now they're back. They'll be ready to play and should be part of what is potentially a really deep secondary group with the corners and with the safeties that are returning for Andy Avalos next season. Tanner McKinney, he said, I feel like TCU will have a strong defense. I'm still questioning the offense, mainly the run game, and if the receivers can gel like they did last year. Yeah, that's fair. I said in that first segment, I was like, on paper, it does seem like if you had to predict, you would say the defense could be the strength of this team, at least to start the year. Now, that's always a risky thing to do with a Sonny Dykes-led squad because Sonny's always been able to have offenses that put up points. And Kendall Browse is a bright mind. They got their quarterback coming back. Gelling at receiver is a legitimate concern. The receiver play at TCU last year was elite. They're going to have 2 guys drafted, possibly 3. Jack Besh was outstanding at that outside wide receiver spot. Savion Williams was as well, and he was able to get the ball in his hands in different ways. And then J.P. Richardson was as consistent as you would want a player to be and was constantly making plays from the slot. So Eric McAllister was also a part of that. He'll be back, and he'll be the lead dog. And you're hoping that somebody else steps up, whether it's Jordan Dwyer coming over from Idaho, some of the young guys like Braylon James, Terry Shelton, Ed Small, Duzi Azukama, who steps up and becomes a force to complement what we expect and hope Eric McAllister to do. That's a big question that's going to be raised. And then that run game, you got to get better somewhere, whether that's on the O-line or at that running back spot. You need to improve to have more consistency running the ball and putting your offense in more manageable situations. David May, he was talking some women's hoops. He says, I was at the BYU game on Tuesday. It was nice to see the way Mark managed the minutes. Uno was great at breaking down the pressure and feeding the ball. Daisha Merrill definitely showed some things. She can be solid off the bench. Yes, I agree. And I've said multiple times, you need to find more depth on this roster. It's not about finding somebody who can play 20 to 30 minutes a game. But are there a few players that could give you 5 to 7 minutes and give your stars, your big 3, a spell every once in a while and allow them to get some rest, take some pressure off them, and hopefully be in a better spot from a fatigue standpoint in the fourth quarter and late in games? Because you can tell late in these games this year, Haley Van Lith, it's tough for her to get jump shots because those legs are heavy. She's playing a lot of minutes, and she's constantly got the ball in her hands, trying to get downhill, distribute, or get in the lane. It's tough to do that at a high level over and over and over again. And if she can get some rest here and there, that'd be great. I hate to end on a sad note, but I did want to pass this along. Before we go tonight. Jeff Williams, who for a long time has been the voice of TCU women's basketball, has been on TCU baseball broadcasts, has also worked on TCU football broadcasts as well. It was announced on Wednesday evening that he passed away. This was unexpected. It was sudden. Brian Estridge put out a post on social media a couple of days ago asking people to pray for Jeff. And now we know that, unfortunately, he did not pull through. I did not know Jeff super well, but during my time at KTCU, I ran the board for some women's basketball games, and he was a pleasure to work with. True professional, extremely kind, just seemed like a great man. So condolences to his family, prayers to his family. I hope that the Lord's near to them and comforts them in a very difficult time. I saw John Denton say some very nice things. He was super involved in TCU athletics, and very unfortunate to hear about this and the sad news. So if you have a second today to lift up a prayer or a thought for Jeff Williams and his family, please do that. Rest in peace, Jeff. Horned Frog broadcast won't be the same without you.